It never is. Okay, we're going to get started in just about a minute. So if you make yourselves comfortable, that would be great. Perfect. Okay, so why don't we get started? I want to welcome everybody to this panel on research, community, and action in a time of upheaval. And I wanted to start by thanking the SIGCOMM organizing committee and Walter and Arpit in particular for suggesting this as a panel discussion here. I think we're going to have a very interesting 45 minutes. We've got a great set of panelists. The way we're going to do this is we're going to start off by having some panelist statements, and I'm going to introduce the panel in a second. We'll start off with panelist statements, and that'll be probably around 20 minutes, and then we're going to leave the rest of the time open for questions and discussions. So while you're sitting there, think about things you would like to be able to discuss in this community forum here. Okay, when I was organizing SIGCOMM program chair for SIGCOMM way back in the day with Christophe Dio, we used to talk about the dream team. When you wanted a group of 3 or 4 or 5 people, who would you get together if you could have your pick of anybody in the world to come and talk about a particular topic? Who would be your dream team? And so I'm so happy to be able to say we have a real dream team of panelists here. And I want to start off just by telling you, I'm just going to introduce the panelists quickly. You know them all. You know them all primarily probably for their research accomplishments, the honors, the awards, the fellows, the award papers, the test of time awards, etc. that they have. You probably know them for that. But that's not why they're on the panel here today. They're on the panel here today because of the leadership positions that they've had, that they've held, and the perspective that those positions that they have or have held in the past gives them on the topic of today's panel. Okay, so here they are. Wow, Jen, you are 20 feet across and 10 feet high. Okay, it's great to see you. Okay, so let me just say a quick word about our panelists. Let me get this going here. Whoops, wrong direction. Okay, so my name is Jim Carosa. I'm a professor at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, and in a former life, I spent 5 years at the National Science Foundation as the assistant director leading the SIGCOMM Computer and Information Science and Engineering Directorate at the National Science Foundation, and spent some time in 2018 working in the Office of Science and Technology Policy in the White House. Tracy Camp. Tracy's going to be our first panelist to speak. Tracy is the executive director and the CEO of an organization that's called the Computing Research Association. If you're from the United States, I'm sure in North America you know about that. Tracy will tell you a little bit about that. She's been a professor and chair in the Colorado School of Mines before that, and is a co-founder way back in the day of N2 Women. Our second panelist is Ellen Zagura, who is the acting assistant director at the National Science Foundation for Computer Science and Engineering. Yay. She is a professor, has been associate dean at the Georgia Institute of Technology. She's formerly a chair of ACM's SIGCOMM'. Okay, Jen, who you see up there, oh, you're a little bit smaller now, okay? Jen Rexford is the provost at Princeton University. If you're not from the United States, the provost is the chief academic officer at a university. She's a professor. She's been chair in the past of the Princeton Computer Science Department. She's been chair of ACM's SIGCOMM', and she's been co-chair of the NSF SIZE Advisory Board. And then our final panelist, Serge Fedidas, professor at the Sorbonne University in Paris. In the past, he's been the vice president for international development at the Sorbonne and a member of the CNRS National Committee. So honestly, when I sat back and said, well, who are 4 people I would just love to have? These were the 4, and every single one of them said yes. So thank you all for being part of this panel. Okay, this is our topic for the day. This panel is meant to be a venue for emphasizing the importance of community and a sense of belonging, and for strategizing about the individual and community actions that we can take, so we as a community, as a SIGCOMM community here, to help each other and to help our research enterprise in this time of upheaval. And I can't tell you how long Walter Arpit and I talked about what word we should use to define the current time, so we chose upheaval, okay? All right, that's our topic. This is what our topic is not, right? You never lead with what you're not about, you lead with what you're about, so that's what we're going to do. What we're not gonna do, this isn't a time for venting. Clearly, there's a lot of frustration, but that's not why we're here. We're not here to rattle cages and pound our chests to each other, and we're not here for partisan politics either. We're here to strategize, we're to talk about action, we're here to talk about community. Okay, the only thing I'm gonna say, I wanted to put up one slide with some baseline facts so that folks here sort of appreciate sort of where things are exactly in the United States, just in terms of the upheaval. So the budget process in the United States for the country as a whole and for science funding is that the president proposes a budget. That budget is then turned into law by the Senate and the House working together, and then that budget is signed by the president. We're at the very, very early stages of the budget for next year. Of course, the budget starts in 20 days. But the facts are, the US president has proposed a 56% cut to the National Science Foundation budget for the upcoming fiscal year. And I'm focusing on the NSF, but because NSF funds about 80% of all the federally funded basic research in computer science in the United States, but they're NASA, the DOE, and DARPA in particular fund basic research in computer science, but NSF funds the largest part of that, so we'll focus on the NSF here. The Senate, so that's what the US president has proposed. Again, the budget is actually set by the Senate and the House. The Senate has proposed a 0.7% budget cut. That's basically a flat budget. And the House of Representatives has proposed a 22% cut. So those are just the facts. And I wanted to make sure that everybody gets the facts, because when you hear on the news that the president's proposed this or that, you don't always understand the context and what the process is. So this is the process. These are the numbers, okay? International students are clearly another important component of how research gets done. And I just wanted to say here's a quote from the Chronicle of Higher Ed that I'm going to have to read here. Some colleges, particularly those with large shares of graduate students, reported decreases in the incoming international student population of 15% or more. Others said the hit has been softer than they'd feared earlier in the summer. Others, folks I've talked to here, have indicated more. But I mean, that's a ballpark figure for just the facts on the ground, the numbers on the ground that I think people are seeing. Okay, and then finally, I'll say that the current administration has disbanded many advisory boards across government, and in particular in science, in the science research funding agencies, for example, all of the advisory boards for the directorates of size, and for all the directorates at the National Science Foundation have been disbanded. So that's all I wanted to do, just so that we all have sort of a basic factual foundation for the discussion that we're going to have. Okay? And I think with that, I'll remind everybody that our topic again, it's strategizing about individual and community actions that we can take together to help each other and to help our research enterprise. And we're going to hear from our 4 panelists now about that. And I'm going to come sit over there with you, Tracy, and bring you the clicker.
All right, great. So I'm first. Is it obvious which way to go? Okay, great. Jim already introduced us. So I've been at CRA now for 3 years, and it is an honor to be the CEO of the Computing Research Association. Prior to that, I was in academia for almost 30 years, most of them at Colorado School of Mines. So what we do, we are a nonprofit organization that was established over 50 years ago to advance and support computing research in North America. We focus on addressing the big questions and the emerging needs of the computing research community. One recent example from our most recent crisis of what CRA has done is when the pandemic hit, CRA, with support from the National Science Foundation, launched the Computing Innovations Fellowship Program. And this program allowed us to keep over 125 recent graduates of PhD programs in the computing research pipeline. So the FAST action avoided losing a generation of computing researchers. So that's one example of what we have done in a previous crisis. So let me talk a minute about CRA and how we're structured. We have 6 different programmatic committees. Each of them focus on a different piece of the computing research ecosystem. One works on research visioning, one works on widening the participation, one works on collecting data and evaluating it for the community. The committee that is most important to the conversation today is our Government Affairs Committee. And you'll notice Government Affairs Committee flies all the colors of CRA because they are working for the whole computing research community. And you can imagine Government Affairs is a very important committee for our community in today's world, and our staff in Government Affairs have been extremely busy. So what is CRA doing in the current crisis? So we do have some real threats going on, threats to research funding, as well as threats to the integrity of our scientific process. But our senior director of government affairs is always quick to note that now is not the time for despair. Instead, it is the time for strategic collective action. And so that's part of, the main thesis of our panel today. We've faced challenges before, and we've worked together as a community to overcome those challenges. Now, arguably, today's challenges are at a bigger scale and more frequent than ever before, but CRA has a playbook for responding, and we are putting that playback in action. So what are we doing at CRA besides freaking out a little bit? What we're doing is we're taking a twofold approach, doing our best to defend the U.S. computing research enterprise while also helping build its future. So on the defense side, CRA is the computing research community's eyes and ears in Washington, D.C. We are a nonpartisan voice in defense of an extraordinarily productive research ecosystem. We've weighed in with policymakers every time there is a decision or something comes out that disrupts that ecosystem from Congress or the Federal Administration. So we put out a lot of statements and positions for the community. So Jim talked about a few of the things that have happened in the U.S. recently. CRA put out statements addressing those types of issues. So we've done, a lot of statements. Other computing organizations, ACM, IEEE CS, SIAM, AAAI, those are members of CRA working with us, and often we put out statements together as the computing research, for the computing research community. We've also rallied industry members of CRA to weigh in with policymakers about the importance of federal investment in research, and we participate in several coalitions that help us advocate for issues that are broader than computing. So many of the issues that we're facing are, for all sciences, all fields in the US. And then we also do a lot of things behind the scenes, many of these things that I'm frankly not allowed to talk about, but we are out there advocating for the community. And thankfully, we are seeing some encouraging signs, such as the numbers that Jim mentioned, that the Senate and has largely rejected the administration's proposed cuts, and the House has mitigated them substantially. But of course, we have a long road ahead, so there's still lots to do before that final budget is determined. So what can you do as an individual? So I encourage you to check out CRA's community action plan that is online on our website. I encourage you to check that out and talk to your local representatives about how you oppose the budget cuts that have been proposed by the federal administration. You might also want to talk to your leadership about creating a short video for the public, because we really need to engage the public on the importance of federal funding for computing research. As an example, I encourage you to search on From Cow to Code, youtube.com, and see a video that has been put out by one member of the computing research community in association with CRA, and we're looking to get more videos like that made. So what else we do? We have 2 events that you may want to consider participating in the future. One is the Congressional Visit Day. Our next CVD is actually next week. And how that works is you come to DC, we train you how to advocate for computing research. We set you up with meetings on the Hill, and then we send you out so you can tell your stories about the research that you do with your representatives in order to encourage them to not accept President Trump's budget, for example. So next week we have over 100 meetings that have been set up in DC to do just that. Another thing you might be interested in is LISPE. LISPE is a way where you can come to an event that we organize and learn how federal computing research policy is made, and then you can work to sway policy throughout your career. In summary, we are collectively responsible for the future of our field. Now is the time to hyper-engage, not just engage, but hyper-engage, as Ponch, a former director of NSF, said at a recent CRA meeting. So I hope you'll engage with CRA or ACM or IEEE or some other organization, or just do it on your own. But I hope you'll engage and help us all work together to create the future that we want. So thank you for your attention.
Hi, everybody. Ellen Zagura. I have been faculty at Georgia Tech for more than 30 years. And actually, 2 years ago, on the same day, I had my 30-year anniversary at Georgia Tech, and I had my 30-day anniversary of being at the National Science Foundation. I went there to head the Division of Computer and Network Systems. Jim told me it was a fun place to be. And when my friends and family asked me what I was going to do there, I said, not entirely joking, I'm going to hand out the money. It's turned out to be a rather different job than that. In April of this year, the head of SIGCOMM' stepped down, and I was asked to take the acting job. So I'm now on the front lines of trying to figure out how to support researchers to do the very best work they can do in a very changing and challenging environment. But I wanted to see if I could say something that would reach to everybody, kind of reach regardless of whether you're based in the US or not. Because obviously we are a global community. SIGCOMM community is a global community. And what I wanted to talk about is, what is the meaning of this word community? So I think a community is formed by something that is shared. So that what's shared could be a desire to get a paper into SIGCOMM. I think probably lots of us in this room have that desire. A community is also formed by a set of shared values. There's kinds of problems that we think are interesting and methods that we think are appropriate for solving those problems. I've spent a little time myself in a different community in the CHI, and the SIG-CHI, the Human Computer Interaction community. And I gotta tell you, the related work section in that community, it's not N-1. Okay? It's 2. In the SIG-CHI community, the related work section is the second section, and it's taken very seriously. So I say that only to point out that we have a shared set of norms and ways that we think about problems, and probably some of us make the related work section 2, but an awful lot of us make the related work section N-1. So we share values about the research that we care about, the methods that we think are appropriate, the things that we find fun to wrestle with. We also share history. So, Bruce Davey, if you didn't understand this "I'm not bitter" comment in the keynote, you should come and ask somebody who's got gray hair, because all of us, I was talking to Nick as we were coming down the stairs, and I said, this is what I remember about Bruce. And then he said, this is what everybody remembers about Bruce. Now, you don't remember it about Bruce if you're too young to have been there, but we can tell you, and then it will be part of our folklore and our shared memories. So, and we're lucky that we are in a global community, that we have a virtual, you have for a professor, you have your community of your institution, but you also have a virtual community of people that you can call upon when times are hard. And I think that's really what this session is getting at, is when things are not normal, when they are uncertain, when they are challenging, community is who you go to try to help you deal with it. Either by giving help or getting help, or by talking about how we as a collective, one collective, could try to make a difference, either make a difference externally or make a difference for ourselves. So, the US funding situation for science is very hard in the US, but it has ripple effects, right? It affects whether we can take graduate students. It affects whether we're available to collaborate. So these ripple effects are really strong. And I think the last thing I would say is, I do believe in this statement that every crisis is an opportunity. And I think it's an opportunity to reconsider assumptions and ways that we do things and potentially change them quite a lot. So I won't share yet what some of those things might be, but I invite you to think about doing something radically different, perhaps motivated by or with the space that's made possible by a challenging time. All right, I think, Jen, it's you.
Great, thank you. Are you girls all able to hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thanks so much for letting me participate remotely. I'm sorry not to be there with all of you. And I also want to thank my fellow panelists for all their service and their wisdom, as you've already heard from the first 2 speakers. I thought I would start by saying a few words about my experience of the last 9 months or so as provost, which is the chief budget and chief academic officer at Princeton. The spring was an unusual time where, like many universities, we had several of our grants terminated, but we were one of a handful of schools that had about 100 of them suspended all at once in the late March period. And so I spent a lot of from the mid-spring onward, thinking both about how to sustain the research enterprise at Princeton in the face of significant cuts to our funding, and also to start envisioning what the future of that might look like in a period of tremendous uncertainty. And so I think something that Ellen just mentioned is really important in that a crisis does kind of force you to think a bit about your principles and your values, and sometimes to be creative in ways that you weren't expecting to need to be. And so we focused a lot on three main principles of academic excellence, access and affordability, and academic freedom. And those have been the three animating principles of the decisions that the leadership here has made. We also focused a lot, particularly in my office, on how to backstop lost research funding. And in particular, faculty who had grants suspended or terminated abruptly, to make sure they could continue their work through a mix of their funds, their department funds, and central funds. And then to consider that going forward, as Jim mentioned, funding will be less plentiful, and so we'll need to be helping people bridge from whatever funding they had before to whatever the new normal, which is still itself not known. And so a principle for us in doing that was thinking a lot about elasticity. In the face of uncertainty, you never know what kind of resources to allocate. And I think the best effort internet is a great metaphor for this, that we allocate resources dynamically as conditions change. And in particular, we've tied how we're thinking about backstopping of research support to how we're thinking about faculty and grad student growth going forward, to make sure we have the resources to support the students and faculty that we have, while being unaware really of exactly what the funding landscape might look like for the longer term. And to also make it easier for faculty to support graduate students, because we want to make sure that grad students who are the most vulnerable in this process are successful in binding to advisors and doing the ambitious research they came to grad school to do. The second population we thought about a lot is the junior faculty, who also are at a critical stage in launching their research careers and prioritizing them for resources. The other thing that we focused a lot on is internal communications. As my colleagues on the panel will know, it seems like almost on a daily basis, the situation coming out of Washington changes. And so I run a call twice a week to bring together people thinking about legal issues, government affairs, financial, research, international, and so on, to make sure that everybody's aware of what's happened in the last 3 days. And to keep up to date on what action items we might need to take, including signing on to court cases as appropriate. And then finally, community. We focused a lot in engaging the community, both in raising awareness of the research work that's going on and how it's funded, but also in getting our alumni community involved. So many alumni wanted to find ways to help, and so we created something called Stand Up for Princeton, that a number of other schools have done similar things to keep our alumni informed about what's going on, and to encourage them to also be vocal about the role of higher education and research and the influence it's had on their own lives. So moving on to thinking more broadly about our community and what our community can do, I think, as Tracy hinted at, we all can do something to help raise broader public awareness of the importance of higher education and of research. In the US, that's been a decline over the last decade in public opinion, and that's not going to change overnight, but we all can play a role, I think, in helping raise awareness, whether it's editorials or videos, or signing on to other larger activities to raise greater public awareness, and also greater awareness with our government representatives about the importance of research and the transformative effect it has on the economy and on people's lives. The CRA has put out something called the tire tracks diagram over many years that illustrates how important computer science research in particular has been to the creation of multi-billion-dollar industries in the US and around the world. And I think that's really an important thing for people to know. The communications of the ACM is putting out a special issue about the role of federal funding in research, and I know a number of people, including some of us in the SIGCOMM community, have contributed to that. I worked with Nick McEwen and others on one about the role of NSF in supporting software-defined networking, but that's just one of many examples of how NSF has been transformative. I'll also say another thing to stress is that many of the topics that we think of as important, the internet, AI, quantum, fusion, all these kind of topics are bipartisan ones. They're not a focus of a single political party. And so there's a lot of opportunity to look for common ground in the importance of some of these research topics. At the same time, there's a need, I think, to diversify the funding portfolios that we all depend on. Obviously, we can't replace lost federal research money, but there are greater opportunities, I think, to engage with industry, both local in our communities, as well as the larger technology companies, foundations, and so on. And I just wanted to say that we should also be thinking about the importance of the NSF and other federal agencies, not just as a source of money. I mean, that's obviously important and urgent, but these organizations play an important role in building community and envisioning about what future research problems we should be tackling and embedding the ideas that we all propose. And so to the extent there's a lessening of that critical mass, we need to be looking for ways to do visioning, to be able to do peer review, to be able to come together for research topics larger than ourselves, to chart a vision forward. The funding agencies are not the only way to do that, but they have played a big role there, and we should be looking to make sure we can complement that with our own efforts. And then finally, I'll just say there are a lot of creative things we can be doing to look at ways to reduce the cost of research going forward, whether that's shared research facilities or data sets, or ways to collectively support students overseas who can't get from one place to another for their education. Whether there are opportunities for greater partnership with industry, greater ways that we can manage with, in some cases, maybe smaller research groups than some of us have been accustomed to in the past, to do a different style of more hands-on work with our students. And so I do think, as Ellen mentioned, it's a time where we can start to be really creative about what's actually important to creating great scholarship and great impact on the world, and to really hyper-engage, as Tracy mentioned. Thank you.
Good afternoon. So I guess that I'm supposed to give a non-EU, US perspective. Of course, I know there are many others in the audience, so you are most welcome to voice and share your own testimony. I think what is important is to understand the mindset. It's the other way. And often when I have foreign visitors at Sorbonne, I try to explain that in France in particular, it extends to Europe, maybe not to Switzerland. We are poorly paid as faculties, but we enjoy academic freedom. And I realize that often this point is not very clear. What is it, this academic freedom, that we care about so much? And this is why we were very surprised, actually shocked, by the situation that we are discussing now. We were surprised that there was almost no reaction from academia. We were, of course, unsatisfied by the fact that there was also almost no support from the civil society. There was a clear position from industry, however. And how does this translate in France and in Europe? Almost instantaneously, we had this organization that was set up. You can take a look at it. The name is Stand Up for Science. And it's very surprising that we had this organization stand up to support US scientists in Europe and from Europe. So for instance, this is a picture that was taken in front of my university, so that's Sorbonne in Paris, in the center. This is a Faculty of Arts and Humanities. Of course, they are always very hot, so as soon as there is a protest, they engage. But even in my faculty, so that's the Faculty of Science and Engineering in Jussieu, you see all those supporters claiming that we need to support US scientists. So why do we see such a strong reaction to what was happening in the US? This is because we believe that our ability to fulfill our mission is in many ways dependent on a strong sense of cohesion. So that community sense that you mentioned. This is very strong. So what are our missions? So for most research-intensive universities, of course, excellence in science. This is very important. It was mentioned by many of you, and we always fight in Europe to try to demonstrate the impact of research. So we always have to face research impact assessment. What does it mean? How do you evaluate this impact with respect to which type of metric? This is something very, very important in order to convince the policymakers, in order to support the funding agencies, and so on and so forth. Of course, education is a second mission, is another mission. This is easier to explain because, of course, we do research-based education. Then innovation, maybe it's easier for this community because there always has been very strong links with industry. And you mentioned it, the dialogue with society. The dialogue with society is very important, and we failed miserably at the time of COVID. Maybe you remember that. Now, this concern is opening up again with AI. So is science going to be able to voice with respect to this AI impact on society? So again, and of course, there is a diversity of reaction, but I think that as a community, it's very important to get together, to develop different type of initiatives. So it could be, again, trying to bold what is the value of the research that is carrying in this community. Of course, the liaison with industry is maybe easier, training, capacity building, and the dialogue with society. So what is the impact that the community is developing with respect to, again, networking at large? And I'll stop here.
Great. Can you pass me the clicker? So I want to thank the panelists again, our dream team here. And I'm going to ask for questions and commentary in just a section. I want to remind people what we've heard. Know what's going on. Jen mentioned the every 3-day briefings that they have. Support, valuing our community. Every single person talked about community in very strong and moving terms. Knowing and promoting the value proposition for computer science research broadly, as Bruce Davies would say, knowing how to communicate that is important. And we have organizations like the CRA that can actually help us do that. Thinking about junior faculty, something we didn't actually get a chance to talk about was the changing expectations on faculty and graduate students, given the possible changes in funding, and what does that mean for tenure bars and expectations and things like that. Collaboration in community, you heard all of the speakers talk about that. And thinking ahead, thinking now, what's a value to preserve, what's a value, what do we really want to preserve, what do we want to change, and how do we want to change that? So I talked to all the panelists ahead of time and sort of knew what they were going to say, and these themes, these are some of the take-homes that I took home from their commentary. So I want to open this up. I'm hoping folks have something to say. We don't want to, as Serge said, sit here quietly and not say anything, right? So I think we have people coming around the room with microphones. Just please put up your hand if you have a question, a comment. Okay, there's the first one. Is that John Crowcroft?
Hi. Yeah, thanks.
Sounds like him.
Thanks for the really positive kind of messaging here. I wonder if you've linked up with the various networks, like in the UK, we have a thing called CARA, which is a Council for Academics at Risk, and we rehome people from Syria, Ukraine, and so on, where they're not able to stay working where they are. And I know that sounds like an emergency exit scheme, which you're perhaps trying to do things sort of more locally constructive within the US and have our support, but there are cases where that may be, and we have this network's been running for years, and I think that all around Europe we have that, and I'm sure other parts of the world. So is anyone aware of that?
Jen, I don't know anything about that. Cara. Okay. Other comments?
Well, it's actually a continuation of John's point. Because I think listening to you, of course, it's a very US-centered discussion, and it's a global community. So I'm looking from outside. So my kind of interpretation of it, that you're still kind of hoping it's a kind of short blip, and things will go as normal and just weather out the upheaval, right? But there was a time, like in the 1930s, there was another upheaval when US science really benefited from, I know, scientists coming from Europe. So, I know, looking maybe a bit more pessimistic scenario that it's a long term, right? So what do you think, how global community can help, right? There are governments like in China who recognize the value of research, invest money. So we'll get a lot of American refugee scientists going to China or other parts of the world that appreciate scientific discovery and research.
Okay, let me make just a quick comment, and then I'll ask other folks. I don't think anybody's making assumptions about timescales, although a lot of it will depend on the budget, a lot of it will depend on elections next year, and then elections 3 years from now. So your point's well taken. Nobody really knows how long this is going to last. To me, something that the destruction of institutions or the tearing down of institutions has, for me, highlighted the importance of something that's been long-term and continuous, and that's the community. That's the Ellen's story about Bruce's I'm not bitter, right? That we have a lot of shared history here, and as some institutions are taken apart, other institutions or other senses of community stay. So to me, that's important, and that's why it's important to me to think about the notion of why we're doing this, right? Because we are a community here for all the reasons that Ellen mentioned, and I think we can help each other. It doesn't mean it's going to go away. I'm not saying it's going to fix everything to just be, oh, we're a community, everything's going to be great, but we can help each other. I firmly believe that.
Yeah, 100% agree with what Jim said. I also want to go back to what Ellen said, that this is an opportunity to consider how we can change and do better moving forward. So hopefully this will be just a little blip instead of a long-term issue. And I think one thing that we can do as a community is, the communication with our community, but as well as with the public. I think we have failed in higher ed of not communicating the importance of what we do with the public. We can do better there. This is an opportunity to change and create videos that show the importance of federally funded research and what that leads to. Ponch often says, the glass on your phone, we wouldn't have that type of glass today, for example, if not for federally funded research. But the public who use this phone every single day, hours every day, they don't know that. So we can do a better job of communicating what we do, why we do, and the positive impact that happens to society from what we do. And so an opportunity to change. We can do better.
So Jen, I see you shaking your head. Do you want to add something here?
Yeah, I just go a plus one to everything that was just said. I think we need to educate not just the broader public, which is certainly true, but to make sure that the decision makers and the people who influence the decision makers, whether that's industry leaders or other parts of civil society, are aware of those same things. It's hard to get the whole country to appreciate what we do better, not that we shouldn't try, and we should. But we also want to make sure that the people who are making decisions and are influencing the people making decisions understand exactly what Tracy just said.
Right, so Jen mentioned talking to decision makers and talking to the people who influence the decision makers. And even if you come from the bluest of states, like I do, you can still contact your legislators and make it known that it's really important.
Yeah, but I believe we need to go a step further. So for instance, as universities, we need to support the free circulation of researchers. We need to support openness. I think it's very important to be a little bit more aggressive with respect to the values that we support. So in my last slide that I didn't comment, I was just exposing this famous Erasmus mechanism that we have developed in Europe, which is very important because it supports European values to young citizens. And this is the way we succeed basically to create this European spirit. So that's very important to promote, for instance, free circulation of researchers among the different stakeholders, university that we represent. As one example, there are certainly many other things that we need to promote.
I'm really appreciative of this panel. Paul Barford from the University of Wisconsin. I want to make a comment about the last bullet point, which I think is really important, and that's the thinking ahead. But I'd just like to change that a little bit and encourage people to think differently. I was talking with Ellen before this panel about what I perceive as the group that is now making decisions at the highest levels in the US. And this is a group that I grew up with. I grew up in a very deep red part of the country, and I know the language that these people speak. And with all due respect to everyone in this room, it's not the language that our community speaks. It's a different language. And so with respect to thinking ahead and thinking differently, I'd like to ask, in particular, Ellen and Tracy, about how you guys are thinking about actually changing the dialogue, the normal way that we've spoken to decision makers, so that we can speak in a language that aligns much more with the way that they think, which is very different, as I say, than this room. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I was writing down some kind of thoughts about how we should both remind ourselves and others about the value of what we do. And so one piece here is that we both do research and teach. And I think explaining how, at least in the US system, how closely coupled these two things are. You know, many of us would make way more money if we left the university, right? But we stay for academic freedom, for the ability to do the work that we would like to do. We also stay, I think, in many cases because of the rewards that we feel from teaching. And the line from the fact that we get, you know, we're funded to do research, which enables us to stay in the university and teach students who go out into the world. This is an economic development story. And I think that trying to emphasize the economic development role of faculty, not just in the sort of inventions that they make, but in the lives that they touch, I think economic development is an argument that resonates with almost everyone. You know, I'd also think there's, in the NSF world, how many of you have not written an NSF proposal? Oh, it's not too many, actually. Well, so in an NSF evaluation of an NSF proposal, there are two parts. One is called intellectual merit, one that everyone understands very well, and the other is called broader impacts. I think in a way what we're being asked to do is amplify and better connect the broader impacts part of what we're doing to other people. And it's been a bit shortchanged, I would say, frequently, and because intellectual merit is so much more of a comfort zone. But I think we're being asked, challenged, invited to say what it is that matters to regular people about the work that we're doing. And I would include our education efforts in that. There is a huge, huge need in every country for AI literacy and AI education to be made available to all, because otherwise the divide between those who are able to get ahead in the future and those who are not may be greatly widened. So, and we have a role to play there. We are computer scientists. Many of us are educators, and so there's something we can do for all of society that has to do with spreading and leveling playing fields for future economic opportunity. So that economic opportunity and broader impacts are sort of the keys that I think about to your question, Paul.
Okay, we're going to have to move on in just a second, so just any last comments either on that or any last 1 minute sort of summary statement you want to add. I'd like to add also that we will all be on the SIGCOMM Slack, so there will be an opportunity to continue the discussion online. But with that, Tracy, I think you're holding the microphone.
Oh, I was just going to say I 100% agree with everything Ellen just said. And if you've never taken a communication course, as a previous speaker today suggested, do it. That could, help you throughout your career. So encourage that.
Are you taking another question?
No, actually, I'm just, if the panelists have any, because we need to move on to the SIGCOMM community, the continuation of community, but the community session here. So Ellen, Serge, and then Jen, if you have any just sort of last summary things you want to say, and if you don't, that's fine.
I'll say one quick thing. As I have moved to this new role, I have really felt a lot of responsibility, and I have been so gratified by the response of the community, the support of the community for the role that I'm playing, for the role that we play at NSF. And so we do have a great community, so that's fantastic, and we should figure out how we make the most of it, as we're all going forward.
Yes, a few words. It's really a concern, a global concern. So it's really international. So I've been putting some focus on the US because of what is happening, but it's really international. So that's also the reason why we saw this global reaction. So I think we need to very deeply consider how we can organize different type of activities in order really to contribute to all those missions that we have discussed all together.
Okay, Jen.
Yeah, I'll just end by saying that I think, as Ellen mentioned, never waste a crisis. I think we've got opportunities to think how we do our work differently, more efficiently, and then maybe in some ways more creatively, and to try to make the most of what has been a challenging situation. And second, there's the importance of community, but particularly protecting the younger members of our community that are early in their careers, who are the most affected by what's going on now.
Okay, great. So with that, I'd just like to wrap up here and say thanks to our panelists, actually not just for being here for the panel, but every single one of you. The reason you're on the panel is you're leaders and you're doing things and you're out there fighting the good fight and doing the good things. So thank you for being here on the panel, but also thank you for what you do in your jobs and what you do for our whole community. I know there are many people, I know personally there's many people out here who are also doing great things to support the community and to push things forward. So thanks to all of you, and you've heard more about how to get involved and how it's work ahead for the whole community. So I think with that, thank you all for being here. Thanks for SIGCOMM for the opportunity to put this together. And Matt, am I turning over the floor to you or Christophe, or we're going to do the community session right now? Okay, thank you again.